So you'll probably notice that this section of the book is called defensive or protective mechanisms. So inflammation is a defensive or protective mechanism of the body. So the defense mechanisms that are used by the body to protect itself can be called specific or non-specific. So the immune system and antibodies, of course, those are specific. And non-specific, it's sort of protecting us against everything. There are really three lines of defense that are non-specific moving into specific. So the other way that we'll talk about it when we talk about the immune system is innate versus adaptive systems. So innate systems are things like inflammation and our skin being a barrier and other things that are not conducive to injuries and illnesses getting us. And then adaptive are the ones that change in response to the different illnesses. So the learning objectives for this first part of chapter 5, talking about inflammation and healing, are having to do with inflammation. So I want you to be able to compare normal capillary exchange with exchange during the inflammatory response. And yes, it's different. Describe the local and systemic effects of inflammation. Explain the effects of chronic inflammation. Discuss the modes of treatment of inflammation. And probably a lot of us know these already. We want to compare and contrast chronic and acute inflammation. So my suggestion is put it in a chart, or better yet, look for the green chart in the book that compares those things. I want you to be able to identify the 4 cardinal signs of an inflammatory response and state the cause of each sign. Easy, right? So I said there's 3 lines of defense. So the first line of defense is a non-specific or innate barrier. It's the mechanical barrier of our unbroken skin and mucous membranes. So really our unbroken skin is a mechanical barrier that blocks the entry of bacteria and other harmful substances into the tissues. Our skin is tough. It's made out of keratin. And it really does give a nice waterproof mechanical barrier. We also have body secretions such as saliva and tears that contain enzymes or chemicals that break down potentially damaging material. So our gastric juices are also part of that first line of defense. So a lot of stuff can't make it through the stomach because the gastric juices are pretty hardcore, acidic. The second line of defense is also non-specific, and that category includes phagocytosis and inflammation. So the main first part of this chapter is having to do with inflammation, which is in the second line of defense, and it's non-specific. So phagocytosis is the process by which neutrophils and macrophages randomly engulf and destroy bacteria and cell debris and other foreign matter. So inflammation involves a sequence of events that are intended to limit the effects of injury or a dangerous agent in the body. So we also have some non-specific agents that are called interferons that protect uninfected cells against viruses. And we will talk more about this in chapter 6 and chapter 7. We start to get into the immune system when we talk about the third line of defense. And this is the specific or adaptive defense mechanism in the body. And we'll talk about that more specifically in chapter 7. But it provides protection by stimulating the production of unique antibodies or sensitized lymphocytes following exposure to specific substances. So a lot of effort goes into research on the immune system. We're seeing the effects of it now with vaccines available against COVID. So really important understanding the process of the immune system and creating ways to strengthen this third line of defense. because once it gets to the third line of defense, it's already gotten past the mechanical barrier. It's already gotten past the tears and gastric juices. It's already gotten past the macrophages and neutrophils and inflammation. And now we got to do something about it, guys, because it's getting serious. So, you know, defense of the body is a major effort in the body. So normal capillary exchange, in general, not all the capillaries in a particular capillary bed are open. It depends on the metabolic needs of the cells, the blood supply in the area, and what the cells need for removal of wastes. There are smooth muscle sphincters that are pre-capillary sphincters in the veins that restrict blood flow through some channels. The movement of fluid, electrolytes, oxygen, and nutrients out of the capillary at the arteriolar end is based on the net hydrostatic pressure, and that's being provided by our blood pressure. So hydrostatic pressure is a pushing force. Remember that from the fluid chapter. The net hydrostatic pressure is based on the difference between hydrostatic pressure within the capillary, which is essentially arterial pressure or blood pressure, compared with the hydrostatic pressure of the interstitial fluid, as well as the relative osmotic pressures in the blood and interstitial fluid. So osmotic pressure is a pulling pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is a pushing pressure. So the differences in concentrations of dissolved substances in the blood and interstitial fluid promote diffusion of electrolytes, glucose, oxygen, and other nutrients across the capillary membrane. Blood cells and plasma proteins normally remain inside the capillary, and that's setting up the correct osmotic pressure. So this is normal capillary exchange. This is how it normally happens. At the venous end, osmotic pressure facilitates the movement of fluid, carbon dioxide, and other wastes. So excess fluid and any proteins are recovered by way of the lymphatic system and eventually return to general circulation. So when everything's working great, this is beautiful. This works wonderfully. It's when things go wrong that we run into problems. So inflammation is an important protective mechanism. It's the body's non-specific response to tissue injury. It's a protective mechanism, and it's our normal defense mechanism in the body. And the idea of inflammation is it's trying to localize and remove a foreign agent or an agent of injury. And we've probably all had mosquito bites. That's an inflammatory process. Small burns, paper cuts probably have limited inflammation, but potentially they do. So the general signs and symptoms of inflammation, which we'll talk about in a minute, serve as a warning of a problem that might be going on within the body. So inflammation is not the same as infection. However, infection can cause inflammation. That's one cause of it. But so anything with the suffix itis is inflammation. So arthritis, inflammation of the joints. Endocarditis, inflammation of the inside of the heart. So anything with itis on the end is inflammation. You already knew that because you took medical terminology. So really, inflammation is caused by whatever it's caused by. If there are no microbes present, then it's not an infection, it's just inflammation. So causes of inflammation can be lots of different things. It can be direct physical damage, such as a cut or a sprain. It can be caustic chemicals, such as acids or alkali or bases. It can be caused by ischemia or infarction. So that's reduction of blood flow or complete cutoff of blood flow. It can be caused by allergic reactions. It can be caused by extremes of heat or cold, foreign bodies like splinters or glass, or it can be caused by infection. So there's a cascade of events that happens with inflammation, which we will look at. So the steps of inflammation is, first, there's an injury to capillaries and tissue cells. The injured cells release a chemical messenger, which are bradykinins. Bradykinins stimulate pain receptors. And usually our pain receptors, remember, are those C fibers. So they're sensitive to those little bradykinin chemicals. And the pain causes a release of histamine. Bradykinin and histamine cause capillary dilation. So that's a change. We open up more capillaries, and a break in the skin allows bacteria to enter tissue. Neutrophils phagocytize bacteria, macrophages leave the bloodstream and phagocytize microbes. So when you cause capillary dilation, it allows the white blood cells to enter the tissue and take care of things. So they're basically taking care of business in there. The idea of opening up the capillary bed is to give the macrophages a way into the tissues. Makes sense, right?